Why was her hand trembling when the rest of her body stood so still? The room was crowded, yet no one noticed. Officers spoke in clipped tones, maps glowed across the projection table, voices overlapped like static. But she stood apart, silent, watching. A single tear had traced her cheek before she even realized it. She wiped it quickly, hiding it behind the hard lines of her jaw. No one saw, or maybe they didn't care. She listened as the mission brief rattled on: a village caught between enemy lines, a target hidden in plain sight, a timetable with no mercy. They spoke about assets and objectives, cold words, hollow. She wondered if they even knew what that place smelled like at dawn. She did. Once, years ago. Long before uniforms and rifles and radios had defined her existence. And now it had come back. Her name wasn't mentioned once in the room, not directly. She was a shadow at the edge of the table, a note in the margins, a role designed to be invisible. Sniper, observer, ghost. Yet every eye that glanced her way dismissed her as background. Too quiet, too fragile maybe, but inside her the storm never rested. They thought strength was measured in volume, in how loud you could bark an order. They didn't know strength could whisper too, could wait, could carry 1,000 pounds of silence without breaking. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The operation's coordinates had clawed their way into her chest the second they appeared on the screen. That village, that ridge, the same place her brother had vanished years ago. A name whispered in reports, in condolence letters, in the thin silence her mother carried at the kitchen table. Missing in action, words sharper than bullets. She could still see him, leaning against the porch post with that grin. He promised he'd be back. He hadn't. And now she was going to the very soil that had swallowed him. She didn't flinch as the commander's voice cut across the table. "You'll be positioned here, Overwatch. You fire when the window opens and not a second before. Understood?" She nodded, short, sharp, professional, no tremor in her face now. They would never know what the map lines meant to her, or how the ghost of her brother was walking into the mission with her. Later, in the dim hum of the barracks, she cleaned her rifle with slow, meticulous care, piece by piece, motion after motion, the way he had taught her years before the war had claimed him. "Always trust the weapon," he'd said, handing her his old hunting rifle when she was barely tall enough to lift it. "It doesn't lie. It doesn't betray. It does exactly what you make it do." She had believed him, still did. The others laughed across the room. Stories of home, of women, of food they missed. Someone cursed about the coffee. Someone else played a broken guitar, strings out of tune. The noise filled the air like static, but not once did anyone sit beside her. She wasn't unkind. She wasn't unfriendly. She was just apart. It used to hurt. Now she used the distance. Let them underestimate her. Let them think she was glass instead of steel. It made the silence sharper when it was her finger pulling the trigger that saved their lives. But tonight her silence was heavier. She stared at the cleaning cloth in her hand and realized her knuckles were white. She closed her eyes, breathed, felt the weight of memory press against her ribs. Would she find his body? Would there even be one left to find? Or had the earth consumed him whole? The questions circled like vultures, and yet she couldn't tell anyone. Missions didn't bend for personal ghosts. At dawn they lifted off. The helicopter blades shredded the air, thundering against the quiet morning sky. Wind whipped across her face, pulling strands of hair loose under her helmet. She sat near the door, eyes locked on the horizon. The others checked gear, cursed about turbulence, joked to hide their nerves. She didn't move, didn't speak. She remembered a morning years ago, the porch again, her brother's boots laced tight, his bag slung over his shoulder. The sun had risen just like this, burning orange across the trees. He had hugged her, whispering, "Don't let anyone tell you you're less." Then he was gone. Now she was flying into the same fire he disappeared into. The landing was rough. Dust rose in clouds, stinging eyes and coating mouths with grit. They moved fast, securing the perimeter, establishing positions. Orders barked, rifles raised, boots pounded against hard ground. And there she was slipping away, climbing higher, rifle across her back, eyes scanning the ridges. Her perch was a broken bell tower at the edge of the village. The stone was scarred with bullet holes, the wood beams splintered and burned. She climbed carefully, boots pressing against fragile planks, until she reached the hollow window. From here she could see everything. The narrow streets below, the villagers hiding in their homes, the line of soldiers threading through like ants, the horizon stretching far and cold. And then her breath caught. That ridge, that exact ridge where her brother had vanished. It lay across the valley, jagged and dark, a scar against the morning light. She hadn't seen it in years, yet it was burned into her memory as if no time had passed. Her finger hovered near the trigger, not to fire, just to feel the weight. She set up her rifle slow and steady, each motion a ritual. Bipod down, scope adjusted, barrel balanced. She pressed her cheek to the stock and let her breath melt into silence. Through the glass, the world narrowed, sharpened, came alive. Movement flickered. Enemy patrols weaving through the outskirts, shadows shifting in broken windows, targets aligning with invisible threads. She marked them all, her mind mapping trajectories faster than words could form. Her earpiece crackled. "Hold until my mark, do not fire." She didn't answer, just breathed. A boy ran across the street below, barefoot, clutching something small, a toy maybe, a flash of his mother's hand dragging him inside. Her throat tightened. Collateral damage, cold words again. She hated them. She shifted her scope back to the ridge. And then she saw it. A scrap of cloth caught in the rocks, faded, weather-beaten, but unmistakable. Her brother's regiment insignia. Her chest caved for a moment, breath gone. She almost reached for it as if she could touch it across the valley. Her hand trembled again. "Not now, not yet." "Sniper report," the commander's voice cut in. She swallowed the storm, eyes on target standing by. The words came steady, controlled. No one would ever know that beneath her calm, her heart had just torn open. She steadied her scope once more. The village below stirred with shadows. The mission had begun. And with it so had her reckoning. What was she really aiming at, the enemy ahead, or the ghosts behind her? Her finger rested lightly near the trigger, though the commander's voice had told her to wait. She could hear her pulse in her ears, loud as the chopper blades that had brought her here. The scope cut the world into slices, and in each slice a truth revealed itself. Men in shadows, weapons glinting in broken light, faces she couldn't humanize, not yet, not now. The mission was simple on paper, but paper never carried the weight of memory. Below, the squad advanced cautiously. Boots scraped against stone, radios crackled with clipped orders, and every window seemed to hold its breath. She tracked their movement, rifle steady, eyes sharper than steel. She wasn't there to be noticed. She was there to keep them alive. Yet her own mind betrayed her. Every time her eye caught the ridge across the valley, her focus wavered for half a second. That cloth, that tattered remnant of her brother's regiment. Proof he had been there. Proof he had vanished here of all places. What if he hadn't died right away? What if he had survived, captured, held in some dark cell until his last breath? She shook the thought away. Too dangerous, too consuming, and yet it coiled inside her chest like smoke. "Sniper report," the voice in her earpiece demanded again. She exhaled slowly. Multiple hostiles moving east, 2 windows, 1 rooftop. Recommend caution. "Copy that, hold fire." She obeyed, but her heart itched with every second. The boy she'd seen earlier flashed in her memory. The way his mother had yanked him into safety. If she had pulled the trigger then, would that boy have lived differently? Or would his life have ended in the crossfire she could not stop? Duty, always duty. But beneath duty was something else, the reason she was here. A memory surfaced uninvited. She was 15 again, sitting on the porch steps. Her brother, Uniform Crisp, was packing his bag. She had begged him not to go, begged in whispers so their father wouldn't hear. He had crouched down, ruffling her hair with that grin of his. "Someday," he had said, "you'll understand why we go. It's not about the fight. It's about the ones who can't fight for themselves." She had hated those words then. She wanted him safe, home, alive. She didn't care about anyone else's battles, but now she was living them, and she wondered if he had felt the same ache she carried now. Her scope shifted back to the rooftops. Shadows moved, a flash of steel. She steadied, breath stilled. She could end it here, a clean shot before it escalated. But the order hadn't come. And in war, disobedience wasn't just punished. It rippled. One wrong shot could undo an entire mission. She waited. The squad below reached a choke point. Narrow alley, walls close enough to touch. She knew what that meant. Ambush territory. Her finger pressed lightly on the trigger guard, not yet pulling. Sweat slid down her spine beneath the armor. Then movement. A figure appeared on the rooftop, a rifle aimed down, her muscles locked into instinct. Time stretched thin. She could feel the weight of the choice pressing against her chest. If she waited for the commander's order, one of her squad would fall, maybe more. Her brother's voice whispered in her head, "Trust yourself." She fired. The crack split the air. The rooftop figure collapsed, weapon clattering against stone. A sharp cry echoed across the village. Below, the squad froze, looking up, startled. "Sniper report," the commander barked. Threat neutralized, rooftop no casualties. Her voice was steady, cold. Silence, then the order, proceed. No reprimand, no thanks, just silence. She exhaled, long and slow, pulling her cheek away from the rifle. Around her, the bell tower creaked. Dust floated in beams of light. For a brief second, she closed her eyes, letting the sound of her shot fade into memory. But inside, something shifted. She had broken protocol. She had chosen instinct over command. And though it had saved lives, it had also put a mark on her. A silent question. Would they trust her again? The squad pushed forward, clearing doorways, moving room to room. She tracked them, eyes never leaving the scope for long. Every shift of shadow, every flicker of motion, her senses caught. She was their unseen shield. Then a voice in her earpiece, quieter this time, not the commander, one of the younger soldiers. "Sniper, thanks." She didn't answer, didn't need to, but her chest warmed despite the weight pressing down on her. Hours passed in tension. The village was a maze of silence and sudden noise. Doors slamming, children crying, radios cutting in and out. She stayed above it all, unseen, unheard. But with every glance toward the ridge, her mind spiraled deeper. That cloth, that insignia, what if more waited for her there? When the squad finally regrouped, the commander's voice was clipped. "Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 at 1600. Sniper, relocate to secondary overwatch. South Tower." She acknowledged, short, sharp, professional, but inside she was unraveling. The climb down from the bell tower was rougher than the ascent. Her muscles ached, her breath short in the thick air. She kept her face hard, though, always hard. No one could see the cracks. As she reached the ground, one of the soldiers brushed past her. A medic, face smudged with dirt, eyes weary. He glanced at her briefly. "You saved Ortiz back there." She didn't respond, just kept walking. But the medic wasn't done. Not everyone would have taken that shot. Command's too slow sometimes. She met his eyes for half a second. In them, she saw something rare, acknowledgement, a flicker of respect. She turned away before it could settle in her chest. The South Tower was worse than the first. Crumbled stairs, jagged walls, no real cover. She climbed anyway, boots scraping, rifle slung across her back. The village spread out below her again, smaller this time, more fragile. Smoke rose from distant rooftops. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows that bent across the streets like broken arms. From here she could see the ridge more clearly, and with it, the cloth fluttering in the wind. Her breath caught again. She thought of her mother's face the day the letter arrived. The way her hands had trembled as she held the words she couldn't read aloud. Missing in action. No body, no grave, just silence. Her mother had never said it, but she had looked at her, the daughter, with eyes that begged, "Bring him back." And here she was. But how could she chase ghosts when lives depended on her? Her earpiece crackled. Orders. Movement. She shifted back into position, rifle against her shoulder, scope narrowing the world. She had a job. She always had a job. And yet beneath the duty, one truth pulsed louder than any command. She hadn't come here only for the mission. She had come to find him. Alive or not. Why did the silence feel heavier than the gunfire? The South Tower groaned around her, stone and wood barely holding together. Every gust of wind carried dust. Every shifting beam threatened to collapse. She didn't mind. Fragility had become familiar. She had been standing on fragile ground most of her life. Through her scope, the village was a chessboard. Soldiers moved like cautious pieces, checking corners, scanning rooftops. Civilians peered from behind curtains, eyes wide, mouths pressed tight. She cataloged every movement, every flicker of danger. Her finger never strayed far from the trigger. But between breaths, her eye pulled back to the ridge. That scrap of cloth teased her again, fluttering in the breeze. She wanted to climb down, cross the valley, claw her way up the rocks until she could hold it in her hands. Proof. A piece of him. But her orders chained her here. Watching. Waiting. Protecting others while her own heart remained unprotected. Her earpiece buzzed. Sniper, confirm East Sector clear. She adjusted the scope. Clear for now. Shadows moving near the granary. Stay sharp. Copy. She spoke with precision, detached. But inside, her thoughts bled with questions. Had her brother stood on that ridge once, scoping the same streets, feeling the same weight pressing against his chest? Did he see the same children peeking from behind doors, their fear spilling into the dust? Did he feel the same ache, the constant pull between duty and the desperate desire to be home again? She adjusted her rifle, tightening the scope's focus on the granary. Two figures moved. Slow, deliberate, not villagers, weapons visible. She clicked the safety off. The world tunneled. One breath, two, three. Then a voice, soft, almost hesitant, crackled in her ear. It wasn't command this time. It was the medic again. You ever wonder if we make it worse? The question jolted her, almost more than a gunshot would have. She kept her eye on the scope, the crosshairs steady, but his words echoed. She didn't answer, she couldn't. He spoke again, quieter. Sometimes I look at the kids here, and I think maybe if we'd never come, they wouldn't be caught in this mess. But then I see what the other side does to them, and I know we can't leave. And still, I don't know if we're saving them or just delaying the inevitable. His voice cracked slightly, then fell silent. Her throat tightened. For a moment she forgot the figures in her scope, forgot the mission, forgot the ridge. She just listened to the echo of his doubt because it was her own, buried deep. She pulled herself back. Focus, granary, shadows, crosshairs. A man stepped into the open, rifle slung low, head scanning. She squeezed. The shot rang sharp. He dropped instantly, body folding into dust. The second figure bolted, darting into the shadows. She didn't fire. Too fast. Too narrow a shot. Threat down, she reported, her voice flat. The radio clicked in acknowledgement. Nothing more. She pulled her cheek from the stock, blinking against the burn in her eyes. Not from the shot, from the medic's words. They lingered, heavy, gnawing at her armor. Did she make it worse? Did her brother? Did all of them? She thought of the boy with the toy earlier, dragged inside by his mother's hand. If he grew up, what would he remember? The men with guns, the fear in his mother's eyes, the bullet cracks that echoed down the street. Would he blame her or thank her? She swallowed the thought and pressed back into the scope. She couldn't afford reflection now, not when lives hung in the crosshairs. Hours stretched. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching long and thin. The squad rotated positions, radio chatter filling her ears in bursts. Every now and then a shot cracked from a distant ridge, answered by silence. The battle wasn't loud today. It was a whisper war, waiting, watching, daring the other side to move first. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but she ignored it. Hunger was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. That ridge was closer now, the cloth brighter in the sinking light. She imagined climbing it, fingers digging into stone, pulling herself upward until she could finally know. But her orders chained her here. The medic's voice broke the silence again. "Sniper, you there?" She hesitated, then, "I'm here." "You saved Ortiz. He hasn't stopped talking about it. Keeps saying he owes you his life." She exhaled quietly. "He owes me nothing." A pause, then softly, "We all owe you, even if we don't say it." She wanted to brush it off, to let silence answer for her, but something in his tone, tired, earnest, human, cracked her walls just a little. "You ever lose someone?" she asked before she could stop herself. The line was quiet for a beat. Then, "My brother 2 years ago, different desert, different war." His voice faltered. "Didn't even get his body back." Her chest clenched. She almost told him, almost spilled everything about the ridge, about the cloth, about the ghost that had dragged her here. But the words stuck, too raw, too dangerous. Instead, she whispered, "I'm sorry." Another pause. "Yeah, me too." Then the radio clicked silent. She pressed her face back to the scope, but the image blurred. She blinked hard, forcing the world into focus. She couldn't let herself unravel now. Not here, not with eyes on her. Movement flickered at the edge of the scope. She tracked it, a group this time, 3 figures moving through the alley, rifles raised. They weren't civilians. They weren't passing through. They were coming. She steadied, one breath, two. Crack. First man down. She adjusted, crack, second fell. The third sprinted, vanishing behind stone. She tracked the alley, finger steady, waiting for him to reappear. But he didn't. Silence swallowed the street. Her earpiece erupted with voices, orders, warnings. The squad below had heard the shots, had seen the movement. They tightened formation, rifles up, tension thickening. And through it all, she kept her eye pressed to the glass, her breath shallow, her body still, waiting, watching. Minutes stretched like hours. Nothing moved. The third man never reappeared, which meant he was still there, waiting. She whispered to herself, so soft no one else could hear, "Where are you?" Her brother used to do the same when they hunted together. She could still hear his voice in her memory, a low murmur as he tracked deer through the trees. "Don't chase. Let them come to you." So she waited. The sun dipped lower, blood-red now, the sky burning at the edges. Shadows grew longer, darker, swallowing the village piece by piece. And somewhere out there, a rifle waited. She could feel it. The hairs on her neck rose. The silence wasn't empty, it was loaded. And when the shot came, it wasn't hers. The crack shattered the quiet. A scream followed. Her scope whipped down to the squad. One of the soldiers fell, clutching his side, blood spilling into the dust. Her heart slammed. The enemy sniper, the third man, he hadn't run, he had waited. And now the battle wasn't silence anymore. It had begun. How do you fight someone you cannot see? The shot still rang in her ears. Not hers, theirs, the enemy. One of her squad was down, his scream echoing through the narrow street, his comrades dragging him into cover. Her heart pounded, but her hands didn't shake. She pressed her cheek to the stock, scanning, searching. The shot had come from the ridge. She knew it before she saw it. The angle, the trajectory, the sound. The very place she had been staring at since she arrived. The place where that scrap of cloth fluttered like a ghost's hand. Her brother's ridge. Her scope cut across the rocks, hunting shadows. Nothing, just jagged stone, broken light, and that insignia still caught in the wind. The sniper was there, somewhere, patient, skilled, watching her as she watched them. Her earpiece erupted with voices. "Sniper, find him. We're exposed down here." She inhaled slowly, forcing her mind into focus. A duel like this wasn't about panic. It was about patience. One mistake meant death. She remembered her brother's lessons whispered across years. Don't blink, don't rush, trust the silence. It speaks louder than noise. But the silence mocked her now. Another shot cracked. Stone shattered inches from one soldier's head. Screams echoed again, orders overlapping. The squad scrambled for cover, their trust pinned on her unseen presence. And she hunted a ghost. She shifted her scope, tracing the ridge line inch by inch. Shadows, rocks, nothing. The sniper was good, too good. She felt the hairs on her arms rise. This wasn't just a random rifleman. This was someone trained, disciplined, someone like her. Her breath caught with a realization that chilled her. What if her brother had fallen to this very sniper? What if the man across the valley had ended him, had buried his story with a single pull of a trigger? The thought twisted inside her. Rage threatened to crack her calm, but rage had no place in the crosshairs. Rage made hands shake. Rage got people killed. She steadied. "Talk to us, sniper," the commander barked in her ear. "Where is he?" Her voice came low, cold, controlled. "Ridge line, west outcrop. He's disciplined, not showing. Keep heads down." The commander cursed. "Neutralize him." Easier said than done. She adjusted her angle, leaning into the rifle until the stock pressed into her collarbone. Through the glass she caught a flicker, a glint of light, brief, almost imperceptible. Scope glass. Her blood surged. She fired. The crack thundered, echoing across the valley. A shard of rock exploded near the outcrop. Dust, nothing more, no body, no cry. He was still there. Her breath hitched. He hadn't fallen for it. He'd moved at the last instant, skilled, calculated, a ghost like her. This wasn't a duel. This was a mirror. The squad below kept shouting, their fear bleeding through the radios. The medic's voice cut through, sharp and urgent. "Sniper, Ortiz is bleeding out. We need that shot covered now." Her throat tightened. She pictured Ortiz, the man who had brushed past her earlier, his face smudged, eyes weary, now bleeding into the dust. Alive only because of her earlier shot. Dying now because of the one she hadn't taken yet. She locked her jaw. She couldn't fail him. She scanned again, slower this time, patient, stone by stone, shadow by shadow. She listened not just with her ears but with memory, her brother's voice guiding her. The best sniper doesn't fire first. He waits for the enemy to think they're safe. And then movement. A subtle shift, not much, just a fraction of a head rising from cover, eye pressed to glass. Her heart stopped. The enemy sniper was watching her. For one infinite second, it felt like their gazes met through the scopes. Two ghosts staring across the valley, tethered by silence. She wondered if he saw her as she saw him, not just an enemy but a mirror. She fired. The shot split the world. Stone shattered, dust bloomed. But when it cleared, the outcrop was empty. He had moved again. Her pulse hammered. This was no ordinary fight. He wasn't just dodging her. He was testing her, feeling her out. A duel of patience, of nerves, of wills. Her earpiece crackled again. The commander's fury cut through. "Sniper, neutralize him or we're pulling back." Pulling back wasn't an option. Not with Ortiz bleeding, not with villagers trapped, not with her brother's ghost still anchored to that ridge. She whispered under her breath, words no one else would hear. "I'll find you." She pulled back from the scope, adjusting position within the broken tower. She knew staying in the same spot was suicide. He'd be watching her window, waiting for the glint of her scope, the slightest shadow of movement. She shifted to the opposite corner, flattening her body against the stone, crawling like a shadow. Her brother had taught her that too. Never stay where they expect you. Become the silence. She steadied again, rifle angled differently now. The ridge glared back at her, jagged and merciless. She exhaled, waited. Minutes bled into eternity. Her eyes burned from the scope, her muscles ached from stillness. But she didn't move, didn't blink. And then she saw it. A hand, just a hand, sliding the bolt of a rifle, a flash of motion against stone. She squeezed. The crack split the air. This time a cry followed. A body slumped sideways, just visible at the ridge's edge. Her chest surged with relief, with triumph, with something darker too. She had done it. She had won. But the relief lasted only a heartbeat. Because beside the fallen figure, the scrap of cloth fluttered again. She realized then what she hadn't wanted to admit. That insignia wasn't just a relic. It was a marker, a warning. Her brother had died here, yes, but not just by chance. This sniper, this ghost she had just killed, had been waiting for her all along. Her stomach knotted. She almost tore her earpiece out as the commander barked updates, but the voices blurred, fading into the background. All she could see was the ridge, the cloth, the body slumped against stone. She wanted to climb across the valley, to see his face, to know, to be sure. But the battle wasn't over. Below, Ortiz screamed again, the medic shouting for cover, for help, for time. The squad was pinned, still trapped by gunfire from other corners. She tore her gaze from the ridge, forced her body back into duty. Her finger pressed the trigger again, snapping 2 more shots into the alleys below, clearing movement, giving the squad a breath. Duty first, ghosts later. But her heart whispered the truth as her rifle thundered again and again. This wasn't the end. The sniper she killed wasn't just an enemy, he was a message. And the message was this: her brother's story wasn't buried in silence. It was waiting for her in the valley. Why did the air feel so heavy when she walked back into the tent? The briefing room wasn't crowded this time. Just 5 of them, seated in a tight circle under the glow of a flickering lantern. The rest of the camp had gone silent, or maybe it only seemed that way. The distant rumble of engines, the clinking of gear, the muted chatter, all faded the moment she pulled back the flap and stepped inside. Captain Harlow didn't look up immediately. He was scribbling something across a map, lines in red ink carving through valleys and ridges like wounds on paper. Beside him, Ortega cleaned his rifle with rhythmic, almost obsessive motions, as though the weapon itself was the only thing tethering him to reality. Patel sat slouched, eyes rimmed with fatigue, whispering something under her breath, maybe a prayer, maybe just her own mantra against fear. And then there was Rowan, the rookie. He glanced up as she entered, his face still carrying the softness of someone who hadn't seen enough yet. His gaze lingered, searching her expression for clues, the kind of silent study soldiers made of each other before a mission they knew could be their last. She said nothing, just lowered herself into the last empty chair, her movements deliberate, her silence louder than words. The captain finally lifted his head. "We're moving out before dawn," he said, his tone clipped, almost rehearsed. But she caught it, the hesitation beneath it, the way his jaw tightened just before he spoke. He didn't believe in this plan, not entirely. The target was simple on paper, an outpost tucked into the mountainside, housing communication relays that had kept the enemy ahead of them at every turn. Destroy the relay and their forces would finally be blind. That's what command wanted. That's what the map suggested. But she felt it in her gut. It wouldn't be simple. 5 against 20, Ortega muttered without looking up. They might as well save us the trip and write our names down on the memorial now. No one's writing names, Harlow snapped. He rubbed his temples, weary. We go in quiet, we place charges, we get out, no firefight unless we're cornered. Her throat tightened. No firefight. On missions like this, firefights weren't optional, they were inevitable. Still, she nodded, because what else was there to do? Patel's voice, soft but steady, cut through the air. They'll expect us to come loud, not quiet. That might be the only chance we have. The captain gave a half-smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. That's the spirit. But she noticed how his hand still lingered on the edge of the map, fingers tapping a silent rhythm. 1, 2, 3, pause. A nervous tell. He was calculating the odds and he knew they weren't good. Later, when the meeting broke and they returned to their bunks, she lay awake staring at the canvas ceiling. The others breathed heavy with exhaustion, but her mind wouldn't rest. She thought of her father again. The story he used to tell when she was a girl about patience, about storms. He said storms always look endless when you're caught inside them, but they break eventually. You just have to outlast them. She wondered if he'd believe she was outlasting this storm, or if he'd say she'd been swallowed by it. The memory pulled at her, but beneath it was another feeling, something sharper. Determination, yes, but also dread, because there was something she hadn't told the team. Not yet. 2 weeks earlier, she'd intercepted a transmission. Scrambled, distorted, but enough to make out pieces. The outpost they were about to hit wasn't just a relay hub. It was a baited snare. She hadn't shared it, not even with Harlow. Why? She wasn't sure anymore. Maybe because Command had buried the warning, stamped it classified, and she knew what happened to soldiers who spoke against orders. Maybe because part of her believed she could handle it alone if she was careful. But now, staring into the shadows above her bunk, she wondered if her silence would cost all of them. The night passed in fragments, eyes closed, eyes open, drifting but never dreaming. When dawn crept across the camp, pale and thin, she rose with the others and checked her gear. The sniper rifle, the pistol, the blade her father had given her when she first enlisted, still sharp despite years of wear. Each piece had weight. Each piece had memory. Rowan walked beside her as they loaded onto the transport. He was too quiet, and she caught his hand trembling as he adjusted his helmet. Without thinking, she steadied him with a hand on his shoulder. His eyes darted to hers, wide, young, afraid. "They'll tell you not to be afraid," she whispered so the others wouldn't hear. "Don't listen. Fear keeps you alive. Just don't let it steer you." He nodded, swallowing hard. The ride into the mountains was long and bone-shaking. Tires crunching over rock, engines growling, the air thinning as they climbed. She watched through the cracked glass as the world stretched below them, valleys sprawling, rivers winding like silver threads. Beautiful, terrible. The silence in the vehicle was thick. No jokes, no chatter, just the occasional cough, the scrape of a boot, the faint clink of metal. Everyone was locked inside their own thoughts, their own fears. And in hers, the voice of her father again. Storms break eventually. But what if this one did? When they finally reached the ridge overlooking the outpost, the transport stopped. Engines cut. The mountain wind swallowed them in its howl. The outpost lay below, a scatter of steel and concrete nestled into the rock, lights dim against the early sun. From here it looked almost harmless. Almost. Harlow gave the order. They split into pairs, moving down the ridge in silence. She took Rowan with her, the rookie's breath already shallow as they descended. Step by step, inch by inch, the world narrowed to sound. Gravel shifting beneath boots, wind tugging at fabric, the steady thump of her pulse in her ears. Halfway down, Rowan stumbled. Just a slip, a rock turning under his weight, but loud enough that it echoed. She froze, pulling him into cover, heart hammering. Voices below, foreign, sharp, alert. The trap was real. She closed her eyes for half a breath. When she opened them, she made a choice. She would not tell them what she knew. Not yet. If this was the storm her father spoke of, she would bear its weight alone until she had no choice but to reveal it. But as the voices below grew louder, as shadows moved across the outpost, she felt the first crack inside her resolve. And in that moment she understood, storms don't just break. Sometimes they break you first. What made her hesitate in that moment? Instinct or fear? The voices below sharpened, carried upward by the cold wind. Boots scraped against concrete. A radio crackled. She pressed Rowan lower against the ridge, her hand steady on his shoulder though her pulse raced. The outpost wasn't unaware. It was awake. Rowan's eyes flicked to hers, wide and panicked, silently begging for answers. She gave none. Only a small gesture, 2 fingers to her lips, then pointing down. Stay quiet, stay low. He obeyed, though his breath quivered. From the far side of the ridge, Ortega's shadow moved. Slow, careful. The sniper rifle strapped across his back glinted for half a second, then vanished into the rocks. Patel crouched further down, her figure barely a silhouette against the mountain face. Each of them creeping forward, each of them unaware of the storm they were about to walk into. She knew it was time. She had to speak. The warning she had buried burned at the back of her throat, demanding release. If she stayed silent much longer, their blood would be on her hands. But she couldn't, not yet. Instead, she slid her rifle into position and pressed her cheek against the cold metal. The scope brought the outpost closer, too close. She saw them now. Soldiers in mismatched uniforms patrolling in pairs, rifles slung carelessly but with hands never far from the trigger. And beyond them, at the far edge of the compound, crates stacked higher than a man, marked with stencils she recognized instantly. Explosives, enough to bury half this ridge if they chose. Her stomach sank. This wasn't a relay hub, it was an armory. Rowan shifted beside her. His voice was a whisper so thin it could have been the wind. "What do you see?" She didn't answer. Instead, she adjusted the scope, scanning for blind spots, for paths unseen. But every corner of the outpost was lit with movement. There was no quiet way in, no easy path out. Her silence spoke louder than words. Rowan's jaw clenched. He understood enough. Minutes stretched. Every second longer made the air tighter, the silence heavier. Finally, Captain Harlow's voice crackled over the comms, clipped and low. "Positions." One by one the responses came. Ortega, Patel, Rowan, her. "All in place," she whispered, but the words tasted like ash. There was a pause, then Harlow again, firm, decisive. "We move on my mark." She closed her eyes, gripping her rifle tighter. Her chance to speak was slipping away, and then it was gone. The captain's signal cut across the channel. "Go." Everything shattered at once. Patel slid into the first shadow, fast and fluid. Ortega followed from the other flank, silent as a blade. Rowan moved because she pushed him forward, her own body shielding his stumble. The descent was chaos wrapped in silence, every step both calculated and desperate. Then the crack. Not a misstep this time, not an accident, a rifle shot, clean, sharp, echoing like thunder. Ortega fell. The ridge erupted. Spotlights flared across the outpost, slicing through the dawn. Voices screamed in foreign tongues, orders barked, boots pounding the ground. The silence that had wrapped them was torn to pieces, and in its place came the roar of war. Rowan froze, rooted by fear. She shoved him behind cover, pressing him hard against stone. "Stay down." Her rifle swung into place before she even thought. One breath, one squeeze, one body dropped below, but another filled its place, and another. Her comm lit with voices, Patel shouting, Harlow cursing, Ortega silent. Too silent. She moved, pulling Rowan with her, weaving between jagged rocks as bullets cracked against stone. The mountain swallowed sound and hurled it back, every echo making it impossible to know where the enemy was or how close. The plan was gone. There was no plan anymore. At the base of the ridge, Patel's voice cut through, breathless but alive. "Charges, I can still set them." "Negative," Harlow barked. "We're compromised, fall back." But Patel didn't listen, or maybe she didn't hear. She was already moving, darting between shadows, clutching the satchel to her chest. Brave, reckless, and suddenly unbearably human. In that moment, she remembered Patel's prayer from the tent, the way her lips had moved, almost soundless, the faith she carried into every mission. Maybe this was her answer. She wanted to scream, to stop her, to drag her back, but the words caught in her throat as another barrage of fire forced her down. Rowan shook beside her, muttering, "We're gonna die, we're gonna die." "No," she snapped, sharper than she meant. She gripped his collar, forcing his eyes to hers. "Not if you listen, not if you move when I say." His breath steadied, if only slightly. A shadow loomed above the ridge. Enemy, too close. She pulled her blade, fast and quiet, the way she'd been trained years ago. The way her father had once shown her on the edge of their porch, back when war was only a story in books. One swift motion, one muffled struggle, and the shadow collapsed. Her stomach turned, but there was no time for the weight of it. Patel reached the outpost wall. She saw her now, small against the steel, her hands moving fast with practiced precision. The satchel opened, wires glinted, charges armed. And then the shot. It hit Patel's shoulder. She staggered, blood blooming across fabric, but her hands didn't stop, shaking, trembling, but finishing the work. The world slowed. Patel's eyes lifted, catching hers across the chaos. A look, not of fear, not even of pain, but of certainty. Then Patel pressed the trigger. The explosion tore the mountain open. Light heat, sound like the earth itself screaming. The ground shuddered beneath her, throwing her and Rowan hard against the rock. Dust and fire swallowed the air, choking, blinding. She couldn't hear, not at first, just a high, ringing emptiness. Then faintly Rowan's voice, panicked, desperate. She's gone, she. She grabbed his face, dirt and blood streaking across her hands. Breathe, her own chest heaved. She bought us time, don't waste it. Harlow's voice finally broke through the calm, ragged, furious, alive. Fall back now, everyone move. She hauled Rowan to his feet, her own legs shaking beneath her. Smoke rose from the outpost, black and heavy, but enemy shadows still moved inside it. The trap wasn't broken, just bleeding. And inside her, the secret she'd carried for weeks screamed louder than the fire. This wasn't over. Not even close. What was worse, the smoke in her lungs, or the weight of the secret pressing against her chest. The mountain shuddered as Patel's explosion rolled through its bones. Fire licked at the sky, thick columns of smoke twisting upward, black against the pale dawn. The outpost should have been ash, but through the haze she saw them, enemy silhouettes, moving with precision. Too many, too fast. It wasn't broken, it was bait. Rowan coughed beside her, blood running from a cut above his brow. He clutched his rifle like it was the only thing anchoring him to this world. Why are there still so many? The blast. Not enough, she cut him off, dragging him behind jagged stone as another spray of bullets chewed into the ridge. Her voice came out harsher than she intended, but she didn't soften it. He needed sharp edges to survive this. Harlow's voice hissed through the comms, clipped and heavy with static. Fall back to Rally Point, Charlie. Now, we regroup, we reassess. Regroup, reassess. Words that sounded like leadership but felt like desperation. She wanted to respond, wanted to say the thing that had burned inside her since that intercepted transmission 2 weeks ago. That this wasn't a hub, that this wasn't an accident, that they had been sent here because someone in command needed them gone. But she couldn't, not yet, not with Rowan's eyes locked to hers, searching for a thread of hope to cling to. They moved, crouched, sprinted, dove. Every step down the ridge was a gamble with death. Gunfire stitched the rocks. Dust stung her eyes. The mountain air tasted of cordite and copper. She pushed Rowan ahead, forcing him to move even when his legs faltered. Halfway down, a voice cut across the comm. Not Harlow. Targets contained, proceeding with sweep. The accent was wrong. The tone was wrong, cold, detached. Not enemy, not them. Her blood ran ice. The comm had been hijacked. Harlow's voice snapped through, furious. Who is that? Identify yourself. No answer, just silence. Then the crackle of more voices, low and clinical, discussing positions, movements, as though she and her team were pieces on a board. It was the confirmation she had dreaded. This mission wasn't about victory. It was about sacrifice. They had been fed into a machine designed to grind them down. Her lungs seized. Not from the smoke, from the truth. Rowan stumbled again. She caught him by the collar and pulled him into cover, her grip iron. His face was streaked with ash and fear. "We're not getting out, are we?" he whispered. She swallowed hard. The words she wanted to give him, the lie, the comfort, caught in her throat. Instead, she said the only thing that mattered. "We fight until we do." He nodded, though tears cut clean lines through the dirt on his cheeks. They reached the tree line where the mountain bled into forest. The canopy was thin, offering little cover, but it was something. Harlow and Ortega were already there, crouched low, weapons raised. Ortega's face was pale, blood soaking through his sleeve, but his eyes burned. "Patel," he asked. The silence that followed was answer enough. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away, just pulled his rifle tighter to his chest. Harlow's gaze shifted to her, hard, searching. "What aren't you telling me?" The question hit like a bullet, because he knew. Maybe not the details, but enough. He'd seen the hesitation in her, the weight in her silence. The others were watching too. Rowan, Ortega, their breaths shallow, their bodies trembling, but their eyes on her, waiting. She felt it all press down, the smoke, the fear, the storm her father had warned her about. But this wasn't just her storm anymore. It was theirs. And storms break eventually. She exhaled slow, then she told them. About the transmission, about the bait, about how the relay had never mattered, not really, about how someone in command had marked them expendable. The words hung in the air like shrapnel. No one moved, no one spoke. Finally, Ortega spat into the dirt. "So we're not soldiers today, we're pawns." Rowan's voice cracked. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" Her chest ached. "Because if I had, you might have turned back. And if you had turned back, they'd have sent others, fresh ones, ones who didn't know the ground like we do. At least here we have a chance." The silence after was worse than the gunfire. Harlow broke it. His tone was low, measured, but sharp as glass. "Then we finish what we started, but we finish it our way." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even trust. But it was something solid enough to hold on to. The ground trembled again. Enemy boots closing in, too many. They had minutes, maybe less. Ortega checked his rifle, muttering something under his breath, not a prayer, but a name. She didn't ask whose. Rowan wiped his face with a dirty sleeve, his hands shaking but steadying around the grip of his weapon. Harlow scanned the tree line, jaw set, eyes burning with a quiet rage that no longer cared about orders. She felt it too, the shift, the storm breaking not into peace but into clarity. If they were meant to be pawns, then pawns could still bite back. She adjusted her scope, the weight of her rifle firm against her shoulder. The forest blurred, then sharpened into detail. Figures moved between the trees, dozens, maybe more. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "They think we'll run." Rowan swallowed. "Won't we?" "No," she said, "not today." The first shadow crossed her sightline. Her finger curled against the trigger. The storm was here, and she was done hiding from it. The parade ground was alive with a roar unlike anything the academy had ever heard before. Flags whipped against the wind. The insignia of countless regiments fluttered as though they themselves had come to life, saluting the woman who now walked at the head of the formation. The sound of boots striking in unison thundered, but it was not the synchronized rhythm that captivated the world. It was her. Captain Aisha Khan stood taller than she ever had, her posture straight, her stride measured but full of quiet defiance. On her chest gleamed the medals and commendations she had earned, each one representing nights without sleep, battles with both the enemy and herself, and sacrifices no one would ever see in their entirety. Yet even they could not capture the immensity of what she represented. The cadets who had once mocked her as too fragile, too different, and out of place, now saluted with their heads bowed. Veterans who had doubted her worth now clapped with tears streaming down their faces. Civilians cheered not just for her, but for what she embodied, an unbroken lineage of courage, passed through generations of service, now crystallized in her presence. The world was not applauding a soldier. The world was applauding a legacy. The speech that rewrote history. General Arif approached the podium, his own voice almost drowned by the ocean of applause. He was a man who had served for decades, who had seen the rise and fall of campaigns, and whose command presence had once dwarfed hers. But today, even he bowed slightly when he handed her the microphone. She hesitated for only a second, the weight of expectation pressing down on her like a mountain. She looked out into the sea of faces, her fellow soldiers, commanders, cadets, and beyond them, millions watching through cameras, waiting to hear the voice of the woman who had rewritten the script of service. Her voice was steady, carried not by grandeur but by truth. I was told I didn't belong here, that my place was anywhere but within the ranks of those who had sworn to serve. They said my hands were too soft, my voice too quiet, my resolve too fragile. But the truth I discovered is this: service doesn't choose bloodlines or gender or the opinions of those who doubt you. Service chooses the heart that refuses to break. The crowd erupted, yet she lifted a hand gently and silence fell once more. I do not stand here as one soldier. I stand here as the daughter of unbroken service. My father, my mother, and those before them, they carried this uniform with pride. And when they fell, they did not leave behind emptiness. They left me strength. They left me duty. They left me the fire that no rejection, no insult, no doubt could extinguish. Her eyes burned as she continued, no longer speaking to the crowd, but to the unseen generations that had paved her way. To those who said I was not enough, I thank you, for you gave me reason to fight harder. To those who stood beside me, I thank you, for you reminded me that no soldier stands alone. And to those who carry scars, seen and unseen, you are not broken. You are living verses etched into the history of our nation. By the time she finished, there was no applause, only silence, heavy and reverent, the kind of silence that meant her words had gone beyond the ears of the audience and settled into their souls. Then, like the crack of thunder, the applause returned, louder, fiercer, unstoppable. The unspoken recognition. That night the Academy erected a new plaque on its wall of honor. For years, it had carried the names of men who had risen through blood, sweat, and valor. But now, at its center, was a new inscription. Captain Aisha Khan, daughter of unbroken service. The one who carried not just the torch of legacy, but lit the path for those yet to come. Young cadets crowded before it, tracing her name with their fingers, whispering promises to themselves. Some were daughters who had once hidden their dreams because no one believed in them. Others were sons who saw, perhaps for the first time, that greatness was not bound by expectations but by endurance. Generals walked past the plaque with quiet nods. The same men who had once dismissed her now treated her legacy with reverence. And though she never sought it, she had become what few ever could, a standard by which all future soldiers would measure themselves. The letter she never read aloud. Later, alone in her quarters, Aisha opened the trunk she had carried for years. Inside were her father's service medals, her mother's faded scarf, and the journal she had kept since the day she first stepped into the academy. At the bottom lay a sealed envelope, edges yellowed with age. Her father had written it before his final mission, never knowing if she would ever see it. With trembling hands, she broke the seal. My daughter, if you are reading this, it means my duty carried me farther than I could return. Do not let grief weigh you down. Service is not about survival, it is about legacy. If they push you aside, remember, you carry not just my name but the spirit of all those who came before. And when you stand tall, know that you stand for us all. Tears streamed freely down her face, falling onto the words that had carried her unknowingly for years. She pressed the letter to her chest, whispering into the silence. I stood tall, Baba, and I will keep standing. The dawn that belonged to her. Weeks later, on a crisp morning, she stood at the academy's balcony as cadets marched below. But this time, her presence did not spark whispers or mocking laughter. It sparked awe, respect, aspiration. The rising sun cast a golden glow across the parade ground, and in that light, she no longer felt like the outsider who had once been shoved aside. She was the embodiment of an unbroken chain, forged by blood, sacrifice, and resilience. The story of Captain Aisha Khan would not end in the academy, nor on the battlefield. It would live in every cadet who laced their boots, in every soldier who swore the oath, and in every daughter who was told she could not, until she did. Closing lines. History would remember her not as the woman who fought to belong, but as the one who redefined belonging. She was not the exception. She was the proof. The proof that when the world pushes you aside, you do not fade. You step forward. And when you step forward, you step into history. As the daughter of unbroken service,